gave me a little bit better understanding of what maybe that might have meant this last October. And so I'll put this up on the overhead for you to see. So you might have to turn that off. So you can, oh, that didn't want to take, did it? All right, how about that? There we go. So you can see the date. It was last year in 2017, the date down here on the bottom. 9/23 was the September the 23rd of 2017. What was happening in the skies and the heavens above was, where's your pointer at? Oh yeah, we need to turn the lights out so you can see. Let me see if I can get that. Oh, we did. All right. Well, is that better? Hopefully you can still see your food. Where's your pointer at, Ralphie? Oh, that's okay.
It's not coming on.
What's that? Not a video, no. Seven, 8, and the ninth one is up here. So there's 9 stars in Leo normally. And so for there to be 12 above her head, it's going to take 3 other, what they call wandering stars, which are the planets, to come into place to have 12 above her head. So it just doesn't happen very often because it's got to work out just right. And the moon has to be at her feet in order for that whole thing in Revelation to take place. So you can see, for these guys to be here and her clothed and the moon at her feet, it just doesn't happen all the time. Well, Jupiter is right here, and Jupiter was in this box of her womb for 42 weeks, 9 months, the time that a woman is, carrying a baby, right? So the Jupiter came out just prior to this, and then this sign appeared. So everybody was wondering, what in the world could it mean? What could it mean? Well, I discovered that the Hebrew concept of having a child, which is she's birthing a baby here, the Jupiter was in her womb for 9 months, is Ibane, and it literally means I will be built. So I thought, oh my goodness. Could it be what we were actually seeing in the heavens last October and September was the Father was telling us that something was going to be built. We're now in a building mode. Well, knowing that, and I'm not going to get into saying, well, this is for sure what it is. I'm only going to lay the foundation to say that's the Hebrew concept behind bearing children. It means building and being built. So I'll let you draw conclusions in your own mind of where you see the scriptures talking about how he's the one that's going to build, he's going to do the building, he's going to do all these things, but what is it that he's building? What is God interested in building in these last days? The kingdom. Specifically in the kingdom, he talks about in Ezekiel, he says, do you take this stick and write on it Judah, and take this stick on it and write on it Ephraim? Well, we know that Judah's there. Judah's been there for a long, long time. But where in the world is Ephraim? Where is Joseph at? But yet they haven't been a people. God said you'll be no longer be a people. Lo me, you're not going to be a people. So they literally have not been built. Well, one of the things that's interesting about B'nai Yosef North America, we believe that what is happening in these days, all of us coming back to Torah, is the family of Joseph, of Ephraim, is being put together. The dry bones are coming alive. They're one sinew on one bone on top of another, sinew after sinew, muscle, joint, everything's being formed. And, in my mind, to me, that's what seems the building is, but I'll let you bring your own thoughts and allusions to what that could be. But something is being built, and we clearly know that there's a big awakening across the globe of people coming back to the Torah, back to the ancient wells that their forefathers dug, back to the ancient paths. And so literally a people is being built right before our eyes. So that's what I think may be connected to what we saw last fall. Isaiah 44:28 says, "It is I who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he will perform all of my desire. And he declares of Jerusalem, she will be built, and the temple, your foundation will be laid." 45:13 says, "I have aroused him in righteousness, and I will make all his way smooth. He will build my city and will let my exiles go free without any payment or reward, says the Lord of hosts." So I want to talk a little bit. Well, let me back up a little bit before. I don't want to get you too excited about that. So what's interesting is this whole building and what's taking place. I had a thought that came to me this past week. Sometimes you get these thoughts, things come in your mind, and you hope and trust it's of the Almighty, and you got to do your research to find out, okay, where does all this come from? Can I make connections or the connections with the Word? So decree that they can go forward and the city would be rebuilt. So I went back to 387 BC. I didn't put it on the slide. I'm going to wait. That'll be part 2. But I wanted to see what was happening in 387 BC in the heavens to see if I could see a pattern. And you'll be amazed to know that there is a pattern in the heavens that matches what we've been seeing here recently. What's more interesting is that pattern is exactly in connection with the red blood moons. Would you be surprised to know that during the exiles coming back home, it was during red blood moons on feast dates during those years? Would that be amazing or would that be startling? I mean, we just talked about earlier that God does things on his appointed times. And wouldn't it be amazing that the heavens would show us that when Judah is coming out of Babylon, making the trek and journey, they're witnessing red blood moons on their own feast dates that God has appointed. Isn't that amazing? They're walking along and they're seeing, they just so happen they keep the feast of Passover, and they look up and there's the moon is red. Would they have seen that as a sign? I would like to think that they were, especially if they're coming out of Babylon being set free. So we all know that it can't be the red blood moons that we just saw because we're still here, right? How many of you know? I know that most of the people who have talked about the red blood moons have said they won't happen again for 50 years. But that's not true. And the reason that's not true is because the ones that happen forward, coming up, were not seen and didn't get seen because of the way that the rabbinic calendar goes. So how many of you know that about every 5 years, the rabbis there's a year happens where they declare the first day of the first month before the equinox. How many of you already know that? Yeah? And so what happens is those years, if a red blood moon on a feast date was to happen that year and they've declared the year too early, they're not going to see that as a year because it's a month off. And we've seen that happen already. So coming forward, and I'm going to wait to part 2 to reveal you the times and what's going to happen, is there's going to be some red blood moons coming in ahead of us on feast dates. And I'm not saying that that's when we're going to be going out. I'm just saying that and I'll show you the evidence of when they were taken out of Babylon, that according to the charts that NASA has of when the red blood moons occurred back in 387 and 386 and 385 there was red blood moons during those years happening on feast dates. April, September, October, again in April, September, October, 2 years in a row happening on those days. And it was one of those tetrads again of 4 in a row. So it's very interesting to me that those kinds of things happen. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening now. How many of you want to know what's happening in the heavens now? Okay, let's take a look. So right now, you can see it's January 27th, 2018. That's today, right? Well, today, Jupiter, the king planet, which was in the womb of the Virgin back in September and October, it's the king planet, is in the constellation known as Libra, which is what? Scales, which means you're weighing and balancing out, meaning a judgment is taking place. So something is being judged, whether to be, are you coming with false weights and false measures, or are you bringing the right money? So something is being judged when you're doing a weighing out and balancing. You're judging if this is the right price, right? Did you bring the right amount of gold? I've got to weigh out your gold to find out if it's right. So a judgment is being taken place. So right now, the Jupiter is in this constellation of Libra. Now, I want to say something a minute. Genesis 1:14 says that the sun, the moon, and the stars, see that star, that one, tell the days, the years, the months, and the moeds. I believe that the stars he's referring to as the constellations, because the stars make up these patterns called constellations, okay? So I believe that that's what we're referring to when we say the constellation of Libra. We're seeing these things happen. So this is going into this time of judgment. What's interesting is Jupiter comes up here, and it continues to go forward, and about right here, Jupiter makes a stop, and it does it on March 13th. Here, coming forward, March 13th. Jupiter stops, and it goes backwards all the way to here, and it stops again, and it goes forward again. This is going to take place. So it entered in here in the entered into the judgment at the last part of what we call December, and it will continue in this position, doing this what's called a retrograde, all the way until October 4th. So I'll show you. You can see here, October the 2nd of 18, Jupiter's still in the scales. The only way it can do that is it's got to do this retrograde. Stops, goes backwards, and comes forward again, which is exactly what it did in the womb. By the way, when it did that in the womb last September, this is the first time it retrogrades after coming out of the womb. So the first place it retrogrades is in this place of judgment, in the scales, okay? So that's very interesting. So this whole thing is going to end. What's significant about October 2nd? That's the fall feast date times, okay? That's when the fall, I'll have to look at my, the calendar to see during this. Do you remember what day Sukkot ends? What was it? I can't remember off the top of my head. September 27th. So count forward, 27th. Okay. Okay. That's 7. Okay, one more. 30th. Okay. So it literally is ending right about the time Sukkot is ending. Okay. So that's very interesting. So those are the things that's happening this year. Jupiter for the next, from now till 9 months. So it might be 42 weeks. Jupiter's going to be in the place of judgment. What that means, I don't know, can't tell you. I'm only here stating what's actually happening up there. We may not be able to piece the two together until something happens between now and October. Just like we didn't know about last September, until now we're able to piece some things together. So that's what's going on. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, and we'll close here in a second, is that there are a lot of things that start happening come 2020. Come 2020 going forward, some very interesting things, and I'm in the process of putting those things together so that I can put together a presentation for you on the things that will happen in 2020 all the way through 24, and then there'll be a separate presentation going from 25 all the way into the 30s. So it's gonna get exciting, very exciting what goes forward. We look to the Almighty. He said that the heavens declare these things. They will point out the things to us. Psalm 19 says they are the ones speaking, and we've got to be the ones listening, but we've got to look up. How do we know we're supposed to look up? Yeshua said, look up. You'll see the sign of the Son of Man in the heavens. Look up. Your redemption draweth nigh. He's telling us to keep our eyes up here because that's where things are going to happen. That's going to tell us what's going to take place. Very interesting things. They declare the glory of God. Any questions before I close? John.
What's happening on the 31st of this month? Is it a blood moon or a blue moon?
Okay, so let me deal with that. All right, so how many of you have heard that you've got a super moon that happened on the 1st of the month, January 1st, and you've got a blue moon that's happening on the 31st? How many of you heard that? Hasn't happened in, and plus one of them is, the one on the 31st is a red lunar eclipse. So they say it hasn't happened in 150 years, something like that, okay? Huh? Yeah. Know this, you cannot have two moons in a Hebrew calendar ever. Full moons. You cannot have two full moons in the same Hebrew month ever. It doesn't work that way. On the Hebrew month, it begins on a new moon when the moon can't be seen. So the full moon always happens in the middle of the month. So when you get to the end of the month, it's a new moon and you've began the next month. You see what I mean? It can't happen in God's calendar. However, that's not to say that God could show something because of the way man is keeping the Gregorian calendar today, that he wouldn't show something based on the way everybody's mentally seeing it in today's reckoning, the way most of the world is seeing it, okay? If he wants to speak to the world that doesn't know his calendar, he's going to choose ways to speak to them that they'll see something that will get them to repent and start seeking his face. I'm not ruling that out that he can't do that. Just wanted to state you can't have two lunar eclipses or two red blood moons or in the same month.
So two full moons in the same month is the definition of a blue moon, right?
On a Gregorian calendar.
On a Gregorian calendar.
Yes. Right. On a biblical month, it cannot happen.
The second one is the blue.
Yeah, the blue moon means it's a, have you ever, the old saying is, that happens once in a blue moon?
Right.
Yeah, so it doesn't happen very often on the Gregorian calendar.
And it's a super moon because it's close, it's very close.
Very close, yeah. So you got several things happening, but again, it's the world that's seeing it that way. Paula, did you have your hand up?
One of the reasons we look to biblical astronomy is that we know the wise men were looking, Daniel, they understood these messages that the Father was speaking through his servants that he placed in the sky. That's how they knew where and when Messiah was born.
Yes. So who was, by the way, she said that, and for the new people, whenever Yeshua was born, who was God says, I don't do anything unless I speak through my prophets. So who was the prophet that was speaking, declaring his arrival?
The Magi, is that what you're saying?
Well, they didn't know it either until something told them. You see, it was the heavens that told them that Messiah was going to be born. They were the prophet speaking. So when he says, I'm not going to do anything unless I speak through my prophets, sometimes we've got to realize that the prophet he's going to speak to reveal to us is in those things that we're looking up in the heavens. They will declare, as Psalm 19 says, the glory, Yeshua, of Elohim. Okay? Any other questions before we close? Comments or thoughts? Okay. Thank you for your time. Until I get this other one put together, maybe I'll get it done before March 13th, before it finishes or starts its retrograde. Hopefully I can do that. Until then, Shabbat Shalom.